I'll let you in on a little secret. Reaching your revenue goal won't change your life, but hitting your profit goal, that absolutely will. If you want to build a life-first business this year, you need to create more margin, both in your finances and in your schedule. If you're ready to double down on profit-generating strategies that actually work so you can work 4-day weeks, go on real vacations, or even take the summers off, you won't want to miss this. In my free masterclass, Double Your Profit While Working Less, you'll learn exactly how to set your business up to scale so you can give yourself a raise, create a clear plan for how to work that dream schedule, and step into your CEO era, the one where you and your business aren't just surviving, but thriving. You can grab this free masterclass at www.jadeboyd.co/doubleyourprofit-masterclass or go to the link in the show notes. Now back to the show.
Let's say you set 10 goals and 2 of them work out and 8 of them don't. That's a huge win. Those are 2 things you might not have done if you hadn't sat down and thought about what you wanted. That is not something to be depressed about. I think that's awesome.
Welcome to the Business Edit Podcast, a podcast about redefining productivity for the modern woman in business and finding ways to work smarter, not harder, in business and life. I'm your host, Jade Boyd, an MBA, business minimalist, and productivity coach. I help overwhelmed business owners simplify and scale their service-based businesses by doing less but better. I help my clients create business minimalist strategies and systems that allow them to pursue ambitious goals while working at a human pace. On this podcast, we'll explore simple ways to grow your business with a life-first approach. If you're ready to scale your business, bring order to chaos, ditch the busy work, and spend more time living your life than managing your life, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Business Edit Podcast. So today I'm really excited to have Sarah Hart-Unger here to talk to us about finding your perfect planner and planning routines, goal setting, all of the planning related items. And I actually got into what I would call like the planner community because of Sarah's podcast, Best Laid Plans. So this feels like kind of a full circle moment to have her on the Business Edit podcast. And also, Sarah, I don't think you knew this, but you are the first person that I heard mention the Hobonichi planner, which that just tells you how not in the planner world I was before I discovered your podcast, which is so good. And for those who don't listen to your podcast and haven't met you yet, I would love for you to share just a little bit more about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Sarah Hart-Unger, and one of the things I do is I have a podcast called Best Laid Plans about all things planning and planning adjacent. I also am a physician. I work part-time as a pediatric endocrinologist, so I actually do that 3 days a week. And then I also have another podcast that I co-host with time management expert and author Laura Vanderkam called Best of Both Worlds. So lots of stuff going on. I also have a blog and do some speaking and all kinds of other fun things, but very obsessed with planning and efficiency. And so it's been really rewarding and fun to just make this part of my career journey.
And I would love to dive just a little bit deeper there. Like, how did you get started with podcasting? And especially for a lot of people listening, it is really unique to have like a traditional 3-day-a-week job and then be so involved in your podcast and have a business of that nature and like to do both at the same time. I don't think a lot of people do that well. One comes before the other, but you obviously do both really well. And I'm so curious on how that all came to be.
Yeah, somewhat organically. So, obviously my medical job came first, but I always had this vision of working part-time in some fashion just because I have had a blog since 2004, and that creative side of me has just always been something I find so natural, and I've always loved it. And so I was at like an 80% schedule or something like that, working 4 days a week. I have 3 kids. They are currently ages almost 7, maybe 7 when this airs, 10 and 12. But when they were younger, I just needed a little bit more bandwidth. But then I realized I had enough time that like maybe I could start a fun project. So I, at the time, had become kind of like online friends with Laura Vanderkam, who I mentioned, and we would comment on each other's blogs. And then one time we met up for dinner in Philadelphia, which is where my parents are from, where I grew up, and where she happens to live. And then a couple days later, I posted that, I listen to a lot of podcasts and maybe it would be fun to start a podcast. And she emailed me back and was like, let's do a podcast together. I've been looking for a co-host. I feel like we would strike a really nice balance, partly because we wanted to make it about work, life, and motherhood. And yet It's true. Like I'm a little bit weird in this space in that I have a very non-flexible job on the days that I do work. Mm-hmm. And I think she wanted someone like that to kind of be a counterpart to her work life, which is very much full time, but in a flexible kind of entrepreneurial way. She's a writer, speaker, author. So yeah, that's kind of how the podcast was born. And that was 2017. And it's, grown and been a ton of fun. And then in 2020, as one does, I was like, what else can I do? My nerves are afraid. I love planners. Let me do a podcast all about planners that will calm everybody down when we need it most. And that's when Best Laid Plans came to be. And then everything kind of grew from there.
And I love that you say you started it to calm people down, because your podcast, whenever it comes up in my feed, of course, as a business owner, I subscribe to all these different business podcasts, and it gets my mind going like 100 miles an hour to listen to all these ideas. And sometimes I just need to listen to a podcast that's fun and calming. And so on those days, I'm like, what does Best Laid Plans have for me? So I'm really glad that you decided to take on another project in 2020, because it's been a blessing to me.
Oh, that's what I aim for. The irony is I'm not sure I am that calm in real life. And my kids are like, oh, it's your nice. I mean, my voice is the same voice, but the tone I use is definitely meant to be somewhat soothing because we need these safe spaces in our lives. So good. I'm glad
that's
it's had
awesome.
that effect on
you. It's like you're planning alter ego. I love it. So one thing that I have taken away from your podcast, and I think is really unique to the way that you plan, is planning in quintiles. And I would love for you to share that process for anybody who hasn't heard or discovered quintile planning, because it just makes a lot of sense for the way that we live our lives. And it might be the breath of fresh air that somebody listening to this really needs to hear if they're feeling kind of stuck in their planning routines.
It's actually funny. So I feel like I'm known as like the quintile person. That is like one piece of my overall system, but it's the piece that everybody remembers. So let me delve into what that is. I guess first a tiny bit of background, which is that I made up something called the nested goals system, which is that you plan yearly, and then you look at those yearly goals every season, and then you look at your seasonal goals every month, and your monthly goals every week, and your weekly goals every day. So each set of goals kind of nests into the other. There's a whole process. So it's not that you're just automatically dumping those goals into that smaller time frame. That wouldn't work, but you have a process that's based on that. And at the seasonal level, I was trying to decide, how would I want to break up the year? The kind of traditional modality would be quarters. That's how most businesses run. They'll go January through March, then April through June, July through September, October through December. But see, I hesitated because they're just so unnatural. They're not like normal cut points that reflect the way life actually flows in this current phase of life. I don't like to say season there, but phase of life. And so I was like, how would I divide the year if I were starting from scratch and there were no, preconceived notions of what these segments should look like? And I came up with January 1st to my kids' spring break. That's that like back to the new year and we're back in school kind of energy. Spring break until the end of school. That includes May or mayhem, Maycember, whatever. And includes usually just a lot, big push, tests, etc. Then there is summer, quintile number 3, which is the end of school until the beginning of the next school year. Totally has its own unique feel. And the nice thing about designating the school dates is that, some people live where summer starts at the end of June and then school starts like in September. Like it can be defined based on your own location's rhythms. And then Q4 is when school starts until November 1st. Totally arbitrary. But I feel like November 1st until the end of December is like reflection season, and it's holidays and celebration and thinking about the next year and taking stock and, valuing our time with family, etc. Like it has its own flavor. And I also didn't like the idea of, mid-August till December being a whole, it just was too long. So I cut it up there. So those are my quintiles. And that is just kind of the seasonal level of my nested goal setting. I choose to divide my year into quintiles. I don't think everyone should use quintiles or anything like that. I do think everyone should think about how the seasons kind of work for them. My academic people, they love their trimesters. They'll have the fall semester and then the spring and then the summer, and 3 works for them. Other people in finance might do the best with the traditional quarters, or maybe there's another kind of quarter system that works. You don't even have to make every segment like the same size. You could have one little mini one, and if one month feels really different to you. So I use quintiles, and I think that does resonate with a lot of people who have school-aged children or who are in that type of academics for their work. But I guess my thesis is you should divide the year in a way that makes sense. I do think there's like the right number of segments, and I think that right number is anywhere from 3 to 6.
Yes, there's a wide variety, but I do just like how you mentioned that it can be different for any person. And I'm sure everybody listening to this is kind of thinking through what their year actually breaks down to. And even as somebody whose kids are not in school, I'm not in school, so I don't run on the academic schedule, but I live in a college town. And so there's a lot of things in my city that do run again, like around the academic schedule. And I think a lot of people are probably in that season too, even if their kids don't necessarily have cut and dry things. And then for business owners too, launches, what I have realized or just noticed from clients that I've worked with, they do really, really well in January and September, which are the natural like back to school seasons. I think that we're all just tied to the academic calendar and we get that burst of energy.
100%. I'll give credit to Lisa Woodruff for that. She's the creator of Organized 365. She calls them golden windows. It's like, oh, this is when your mind is open to like personal change and I want to work on something or start something. And I do find those cut points really powerful. Like, okay, sure, they're arbitrary, but I don't care. I'm going to leverage that arbitrariness in my own life. And I'm more successful when I decide to start something at a natural cut point. And it doesn't for me have to be January, September. It could even be like the summer or like whatever. But when it's a fresh start, that always helps.
Yeah. When you have the energy, got to use it because it's not always there. Got to take advantage of it when it comes. And it's so funny, like I was mentioning before we started this conversation, it's so funny that we're having this conversation today because just this morning, one of my clients was in Slack asking me, what planner can I use? It's October right now, but she's already booking clients for the new year and starting to plan things out as far as launches and business stuff goes for January, but she doesn't have a January planner yet. And right now we're in the midst of planner launch season and a lot of exciting new planners, so many to choose from. It's insane, the variety of planners, and even within planner brands, how many options there are. And then you get into customizable planners, and it can be a lot. And she was even saying, hey, I'm wasting a lot of time on this. Can you help me just find a planner? And so I'm curious, as someone who reviews tons of planners, how do we navigate that planner overwhelm and actually find what is going to work for us? What are your best tips for us?
Oh, I have many. I mean, first of all, I'll say there's not one perfect planner. So relieve yourself of the pressure to find. It's not like you're finding your soulmate here. You can always switch if it doesn't work out. It is just a pile of paper at the end of the day. So don't be super, super stressed out about it. Sometimes you do have to try something to figure out if it's going to work. But I also think there are some really key questions you can ask yourself to very much narrow things down. The first question I would ask yourself is this planner going to be my calendar in addition to having tasks and lists and tracking and stuff like that? Because that is going to really influence the types of layouts that are going to be likely to work for you. If you are going to be using it for actual calendaring, as in like I have a 3 p.m. meeting and the place where I'm putting it is in my planner, I raise my hand with this. I do use my calendar as like my source of truth there. And I already have events in my 2025 calendar for that reason. But if that's you, then that helps because most likely you're going to want some kind of hourly layout, or my favorite would be like a vertical hourly where each of the days are in a column and you can see hours going from the top to the bottom. Because if you're really going to be dividing and blocking your time that way, that's just the easiest way to visualize it. There are a number of companies that offer that, but it's not every company. So that kind of helps narrow things down to start with. The second thing to ask yourself is, are you going to want a daily page? Like, do you like a fresh start for each day? And do you want that to actually be part of your planner? Because if so, that also is going to like really, really limit what you're looking for. If you want both, if you want a daily page and that weekly view to kind of put time sensitive things into, you're going to have only a few choices. So it's great once you know what you need. If you don't want a daily page, then great. Then you can put your search in for the weekly and then find the layout that resonates with you the best. And your search can be more dictated by aesthetics and kind of other things that appeal to you with respect to the brand. The third thing you should ask yourself is like, what are the deal breaker kind of physical features of the planner? Some people really, really prefer spiral. Other people really, really prefer like a bound book style. And then other people like binders or discs. So you have to ask yourself, which one of those is the best for you. If you don't have a lot of desk real estate, then usually spiral or disc bound is the way to go because you can always fold it in half and see just, part of it. Size is also going to come into play. The type of paper. So are you someone that doesn't mind having paper that has a little bit of show through, like really thin paper? We can talk about some specific planners, but a lot of the kind of fancier planners that use Tomo River paper from Japan, they're very thin paper, which is great. They're compact, but they also do have some, kind of ghosting on the other side. And if you want a crisp white page every time you turn the page, that's not going to work for you. There is the aesthetics as well. Just overall, is it very feminine and flowery, or is it going to be very minimalist and professional? So thinking about that. And I would actually write down your kind of choices for all of those before you go ahead and start searching, because that will that will just make it much, much, much easier to narrow things down. I wish there was a search engine where you could then put all that stuff together. And I actually met with the developer once where we were like, we're going to make planner base. And then I was like, I do not want to maintain this at all. So until AI can do it, it doesn't actually exist.
That's where my mind went. Have you tried asking ChatGPT all of these things and see what it comes up with?
My guess is that I'm concerned it wouldn't have these things change so quickly, and for ChatGPT to know what's offered this year and to have a really wide variety. I'm sure ChatGPT would give you a couple of options, but my guess is that it wouldn't be
now I want to try it.
Options, but I totally want to. If you try it, let me know. Send me the list and I can critique it. Yeah.
Tell me if it's good or not.
Yeah, absolutely. But asking yourself those questions will help kind of narrow things down, and then you can go ahead and shop around. And I'm happy to talk about specific scenarios and specific brands that I like for each of these, different things. But that framework should kind of get you started. Oh, one more. Sorry. Okay. One more thing. Structure versus open-ended. Some people want a lot of guidance from their planner, and other people are like, give me blank space, and you have to figure out where on that continuum you are, because those people are very different, and some people, it's going to very much influence what you're looking for. Like a Hobonichi is going to be very empty and free-flowing, and a full focus is going to be put this goal in this spot, and your calendar here, and your to-do list there, and your gratitude there, and it's going to be much more specific.
Yes. So I would love to know your planning stack for next year. And I would love to have you go through these questions as an example. And I'm curious what your preferences are and why.
Sure. I mean, I like a lot of different planners, to be honest, but I do use my calendar in my planner. So I like a vertical weekly for that reason. So that limits me a lot. I am left-handed, therefore my pages need to lay completely flat. That's very important to me. So that rules out a few. I don't like super feminine. I like more of a minimalist kind of a look. And I like to have daily pages in addition to my weekly pages in the same book. I've gone back and forth on that. Sometimes I kind of like them being separate because there is something to be said for being able to look at your weekly while you're creating your daily page. Yeah. I mean, I get why that's helpful, but right now I just tend to flip back and forth. So my planner stack for next year is fairly minimal compared to what I may have done in prior years, but I'm going with a Hobonichi cousin again. That is A5 size. So it's half a page. If you take a printer paper and you fold it in half, that get width-wise, you will get an A5 size page approximately. So that's kind of the size. And it does contain monthly, yearly, weekly, and daily pages all in the same book. It's very thin paper. I am not a fountain pen user, and I generally just use ballpoints like this lovely Jetstream in there, and that works well for me. And then I always have some other planner that I like to put all of my goals and lists for the year. This 2024, I used a cloth and paper disc bound for that, and it worked nicely, but I think I'm going to try to go even more streamlined. So I ordered a Hobonichi Weeks to do that for next year. But I don't know. I'm not totally firm on what I'm going to use the actual weekly spreads for. Maybe a reading tracker or something like that. It's more that I want to have all the blank notes pages that are included in there to put my seasonal goals and my annual goals, and then any other kind of one-off list that I decide that I'd like to keep on paper. So that's pretty much it. Oh, and I have a 5-year journal that I've kept since 2021. So I'm in year 5 of it next year, and I'm so excited. Now, is every day filled in every year? No, but most days have at least a few. I would say the average number of entries per day is 2 to 3. So it's fun. Like you can see COVID-y stuff in the beginning. And then like my kids getting older, I knew it would be a really fun window of time to do that. So I will continue that for my last year in there. And that's it right now. I don't have any other plans. Sometimes I end up adding like a random notebook or something like that if I have a project and I just want it to have its own book. But right now, that's where we are. However, I reserve the right to like pivot into random products as the year goes by, because sometimes I just like to try things that come out. And I particularly have this odd pattern of like in the spring and summer, especially the summer, it just feels so different. Sometimes I just migrate out of my system and use something else temporarily and then go back for the end of the year.
I'd imagine it's really hard because you are actively reviewing planners and you see obviously a lot of different options. It has to be hard not to want to try all of them and hop out of your system.
I've gotten a little better about it. I think I was really like, I would have like so many, it was like almost frustrating. And then I did like give them away. And I've definitely started ordering fewer of them just because, I don't know, some of the content of my podcast has shifted away from the just traditional reviews, although I still like doing them sometimes. And I know people still like hearing them. But yeah, it is sometimes a challenge not to switch around, but yet I enjoy it when I do. So I don't consider it like, I used to be like, oh, this is a bad thing or something. And now I'm like, it's fun, just like anything else.
I align with you on so many things that you went through as far as the layout, the minimalist feel, more open-ended, aesthetics, flat lay. But I chose the common planner for next year, which I did a couple years ago. And I did the full year, the undated version of that one. This year I was in the Hemlock and Oak daily planner, but I'm going back to common planner and I did the 2-part for next year. So there's one planner for January through June and another one for July through December, because I also feel like I don't want to switch up my system. I love the planner, but it does just feel good to have a new planner midway through the year and not be in the same one the entire year.
I used an Avec this year for that reason. And look, I have it right here. It actually has no cover on it. Look how tiny this is. This is like the streamlined life right here.
It is tiny.
The amount of data in this thing is like mind blowing. I mean, it's just like so much stuff fits in this little book. It's kind of amazing. But yeah, Sterling ink is beautiful. Their paper is great. Some people say it shouldn't be different, but some people say it's better. And
then Hobonichi, the Tomoe River. Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've had a Hobonichi Weeks, but I didn't use it for very long. I just felt obligated to try it. I was curious. And I did do like daily journaling in the Hobonichi Weeks for a little bit and then eventually got out of it. Like I don't like writing on the tiny paper. For anybody who doesn't know what a Hobonichi Weeks is, it's like 3 inches by 6 inches. So it's very tall, but also very skinny. So it's not very wide paper and it can be tricky to write on.
Yes. And they actually have slightly smaller grid squares compared to like a cousin. I think it's like 3.3 millimeters versus 3.8. So if you feel cramped, there's a reason.
Yes, it is very tiny. You have to have tiny handwriting to fit it in the boxes. And of course, I'm a perfectionist and want everything to look super neat. And so between that and my hand slipping off the page, it wasn't very rewarding for very long, but I did keep it up for like a month. And they're very beautiful planners.
It was a trial.
Yes, it was a trial. Ended up not working. And then I tried to repurpose it actually for baby registry planning and planning out like different things that I was going to get on different days. And of course, I like in every topic, I would ask my sisters, what did you get for this? Because there's so many options for every single thing. So I tried to like split it out and that worked for a little while too. But that season obviously came to a close as well. But yeah, I love the Tomoe River paper. I don't mind a little bit of show through, but the common planner, honestly, it doesn't show through very much.
Yeah, that's why I think the paper is slightly different and possibly slightly better. There's also been some like buzzing about the 2025 paper being a downgrade in certain products in various circles. Nothing official. No statements have been made or anything like that. But if you go to the Hobonichi Reddit, you will see what I mean.
Interesting. Some conspiracy theories here.
Yes. But I got mine and it seems to be fine. I've been using it already. I'm happy with it.
Okay, good to know. I'm also curious, besides your ballpoint pen, what are some other of your favorite planning accessories to use?
I don't use that many, to be honest. I use a lot of mildliners. My latest, very minimalist thing that I do is I make check boxes out of the mildliner. I just fill in the box and it makes like a perfect little square. And I'm like,
oh nice.
I'm happy. It's like color and I don't know. Yeah, I mean, a given day, that's all I use. I have some flags, Midori, what are they called? Like the monthly tabs, stick-on tabs that I like to use in the Hobonichi. I do have a fun little stamp that I got from Hobonichi. I think the brand is Pochito, Pochito. Don't quote me on that. I can send you a link to it, but it's super cute. They come in a bunch of designs, and the one I have has like a little book and a little microphone, a little TV. So if I like want to decorate my page, it's a push button style. So the ink pad's already there, and you just put it on the page and press the button, and it like magically puts the cute little picture on there. So that's as decorative as I get. I don't use a ton of stickers. I don't do like the sticker kit thing. I've never done that really. I'd say I have more of a functional bullet journal-esque style than a like stickered up, very feminine, airy style. Yeah.
It did not prevent me from getting a whole bunch of passion planner stickers recently, because for my brother, he just started college this fall. And so obviously I was like, I'm going to get you a planner. And the passion planner is really, really great for college students. And he approved. So I was ordering it anyway, and it was hard to resist. They have some really, really cute stickers. And every once in a while, I'll stick one on if I'm like journaling. This year, I'm using my planner as a journal too, because daily pages are just like way too much for me to just plan, especially in the Hemlock and Oak. There's a lot of real estate on the page. So I've been doing both in one, and putting a sticker on it sometimes makes me fill the page without having to write as much. So that's my little hack.
My 5-year journal has some stickers in it because I just think it's fun to like commemorate. I'll even put like the Trader Joe's stickers in there. Like I'm indiscriminate, like whatever I find. So that's cool. Passion Planner is such a great student planner. It's super, super structured. So I think that's a great choice for your brother.
Yes. And also has the time blocking for anybody who is keeping their calendar in their planner as well. For people who are looking for their maybe not perfect planner, we've decided that's not a thing, but looking for the best planner for them in this era of their business, what do you think people often overlook, or like what mistakes do people make when they're searching for planners?
I think people tend to err on the side of too much structure, to be honest. They find a thing and they're like, ooh, that would be cool to track. But if you're not already tracking it, just because it looks cool on a page and someone has kind of suggested it to you, like you don't need to add that, and you probably won't on a consistent basis. So I think people tend to err on the side of too much. And particularly if you're not using a planner at all, I would kind of go for one that's like smaller, has less sections and less dictated to you. And then you can always kind of like add to that, if that makes sense.
I agree. And also, I really admire people who can have multiple planners and keep up with them and have multiple planners for different areas of their life. I have no idea how they do it. I can only have one planner because it has to be in front of me at all times. Otherwise, I will not look at it and it will not help me.
I agree with you. I don't totally understand the concept of like work planner. I think for some people, they have so many complex work tasks and maybe they don't have an electronic system for that it makes sense. For most people, I feel like work is going to be pretty electronic. And so I don't know. I think most people probably are better off with one, but yeah.
So getting into digital versus physical, I would love to know how you balance using both and like recommendations you have for balancing both. Because I'm the same way. I put everything in ClickUp, which everybody here knows by now because I talk about ClickUp all the time. But there's something different about having a piece of paper right in front of you and having the like discipline to look at everything that you shoved into your digital space that's unlimited, and then looking at your calendar and being like, okay, here's what I can actually do today. But I'm curious how you balance both and if you have any tips.
Yeah, so calendar wise, I don't personally use a digital calendar other than for reference. I mean, like if there's a soccer game, it's going to dump onto my phone's calendar so I can like check it that way. But anything I've actually committed to doing, like I've decided it's happening in my life or even my kids' life, if it means I'm driving them, is going into my paper planner. So it's almost like I use the digital sources as a reference to make sure my paper is the source of truth and up to date. And so for things like work meetings and my soccer calendar, as I see stuff pop up, then I look at my paper calendar, decide if it actually fits or not, and then like accept or decline accordingly. And I do kind of like a weekly audit where I make sure that all these stuff coming at me are being processed so that I'm making that intentional decision on paper. That's like more for calendaring. For like tasks, I actually do a lot of that on paper as well, but reference stuff all goes into Apple Notes. So if it's like, a document I might need to find, or like podcast show notes or advertising scripts or like things like that, that's all kind of like sorted in my digital filing cabinet. And for me, I use Apple Notes for that just because it's like so easy and minimal. And I know some people have had issues with it, but I never had. So crossing my fingers, it stays that way. That's kind of my preferred landscape. And then I have the odd Google Sheets for various things that make more sense to track that way. And then I use Gmail for my like primary email universe.
One of my clients this morning was just talking about Apple too. And I've never played around with Apple Notes. I've always been a Google Keep person, which I think they're pretty similar. There's some differences for sure. But yeah, everybody needs a notes app on their phone.
Yes, your second brain, as Tiago Forte would say. He wrote the book, Building a Second Brain. And yeah, you can use, there's like OneNote, there's Notion, I'm sure ClickUp has some sort of version of it even built within. There's so many different things. I don't think there's any one right choice, but having something that you are using and regularly maintaining is key.
Yeah. I'm curious. It's planner launch season, but also we're entering the reflection and goal setting season. And I feel like people either sit on one side or the other. Either I absolutely love goals, I cannot wait, or I hate setting goals. I don't know why anybody would do it. And it's frustrating and disappointing, and I might as well not do it. And I'm curious, especially now, and even in the productivity space, there's been this shift where it has moved kind of away from the girl boss, you can have everything, into the more like, just enjoy your life, be present. Let's get rid of this toxic productivity mindset. I'm wondering where you sit in that balance, being somebody who does enjoy planning and goal setting, but also somebody who, wants to enjoy their life and be realistic. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that pendulum and trends that you've seen, but also how you balance that in your own life.
I think this is so interesting. So to me, this is like kind of a problematic framing of goals to begin with. Like, I do believe in goals, but I do not believe goals have to mean kill yourself and girl boss. Goals can be, I'm going to have a restful year. To me, goals are all about intention rather than being about one specific way of being, whether that's aggressively getting stuff done or like very much laid back, focus on resting, relaxing, whatever it is. I just think of goals as I am deciding what I want my X block of time to look like. I 100% understand that it's not always going to come to fruition. And I want to build that into my process. That's why we're not just setting annual goals and then going about our year thinking they're all going to happen. That's why we're going to each month say, is now the right time to do this? Is now the right time? How do I feel, etc.? So yeah, I guess I'm not anti-goal. I believe that goal setting can be compassionate. I believe that goal setting doesn't have to mean a specific vibe. And I do believe in the act of very intentional reflection to think about what we want at different time points so that we can craft a life the way we want our life to live. We only get one of them. So yeah, that's my goals soapbox and how I don't think those two are at odds.
And I think what you hinted on checking in with your goals throughout the year, I think that's one of the reasons why people get really frustrated with goals, because the goals that we might set at the beginning of the year, halfway through the year might not make sense anymore and might not feel exciting or aligned. And we can either let ourselves think like, oh, I failed at that, or just accept that we are constantly changing and our goals are changing too. And it's not a failure, or, you don't get graded on your goals. It's okay to change them. And that doesn't mean you failed. It just means that you changed your mind, and that's okay.
100%. And I think that having that compassion and reflecting on what worked and didn't work that's where like compassionate goal setting comes in. This is not a test. It's okay I could set a bunch of goals for 2025 and we can have another pandemic and they wouldn't be doable. I still think it's kind of worth thinking through the process, because who knows, maybe one of them does make sense and I push it through, or maybe they don't, but at least I kind of know where I wanted to go, if that kind of makes sense. And I also think that like, let's say you set 10 goals and 2 of them work out and 8 of them don't. That's a huge win. Those are 2 things you might not have done if you hadn't sat down and thought about what you wanted. That is not something to be depressed about. I think that's awesome. And then, maybe the year went a different direction than you thought, and maybe it went a better direction than you thought. Different doesn't even have to mean worse, but it doesn't mean that time spent thinking about it was wasted, because it might have been the momentum you needed for those 2. And maybe those 2 were really the ones that were the most important anyway.
So you kind of hinted on this earlier, but you do go through your nested goal setting process. And I would love to dig a little bit into what that is and what goal setting is going to look like for you in the new year.
Yeah. So nested comes from the term nesting dolls. I think some people are like nested, like you're sitting at home and you're like in the nest, and it's not. But I mean, I kind of like that imagery too. But it's the idea that like each time frame kind of sits in the next one, so that every time frame you're kind of looking up above and using that to inform your shorter time frame. But you're not using that to just dump in. So let's do an example. Let's say you're setting the monthly goals for the month of February. You are going to go ahead and start by looking at your seasonal goals that you set for the beginning of the year. And you're going to integrate 3 things. You're going to integrate, okay, what do I feel like doing from this list? Do any of these things actually resonate with me right now? Number 2, what do I have going on in my life already? Like what's on the calendar? What's coming up? What are things that I might not have even anticipated when I wrote that seasonal list? And then number 3, holistically, what is my vibe right now for this month? Am I tired? Am I energetic? Like, am I raring to go? Like, is there something else that's stressing me out big time? And you can put those 3 things together and then you're crafting your goals for the month. When you sit there on your week to make your goals, you're looking at your month list and so on. So basically each level kind of sits in the level above, and the hierarchy goes from annual goals to seasonal goals to monthly goals to weekly goals to daily goals, so that, each day you've created those weekly goals and you're going to integrate those 3 things. So like what makes sense? What kind of resonates me off of this list? What do I already have on my schedule and how am I feeling? Put those 3 things together and that's going to make your to-do list, not just automatic. Like, oh, week said I had to do this. I will dump all on today and get none of them done and feel bad. Like there doesn't need to be any feeling bad. This is just a set of ideas to draw from, because if we're just starting from scratch every day, we're unlikely to get to some of those big picture things that in the long run are going to help us get the things we wanted to begin with. But at the same time, we don't want to go the other extreme and just kind of assign ourselves pieces of some giant task throughout the year, because that's going to backfire. I feel like this hits the balance between those 2 things.
Yeah. And do you have a planning routine? Like, do you go to a special place or, leave your house, which this year for the first time, I might even go to a hotel because I feel like I just need to get out to have some clarity of thought.
So for annual planning, it's a big thing for me. And that's actually what spawned Best Laid Plans Live. So I have a 2-day retreat that women come to. Last year we had 20. This year we have 30. Laura actually joined me as co-host this year. So in Fort Lauderdale, like we plan in person. We have a whole workbook. I lead people through sessions. And there is a home version of this that you can do online with me called Best Laid Plans at Home. If you're interested, if you want like a guided annual planning session, I offer that. But in addition, you could also completely DIY it. You could do a retreat with your partner. You could do it by yourself. You could use a like goal-directed planner, like the Power Sheets is one popular one that kind of works you through a lot of those annual planning type questions. But yeah, I think annual planning deserves kind of a big chunk of time. But obviously, we're not going to do that every day, right? The smaller the time frame, the smaller the ritual. So my daily planning ritual does exist, but it's like 10 minutes in the morning with my planner and my cup of coffee before I go out for my run. And then kind of imagine each time horizon it's scaled, right? So my weekly planning might be a couple of hours on a Thursday. My monthly planning might be more like half a day. And then I try to do a full day or so of reflection and thinking about things for my seasonal planning. So yeah.
For a lot of people listening, they might be hearing this and think that is a lot of time for planning. And I would love to hear your response to this, and even listening like to you now, hearing it in the context that I'm in. So I just had a baby this summer, so a lot has changed. And those are definitely the planning routines that I used to be in. And I'm trying to configure like, what does that kind of look like moving forward? Like I said, might need to go to a hotel to get enough time away to actually think about things. But you have 3 kids as well. And so I would love to hear, and you can get up on your soapbox if you want to, the value of that time. And does it really feel like a lot of time to you?
I'm working on a bigger project, and I add part of one of the chapters, I added up like all the minutes if you did what I just said, and it came out to something like 1.5% of your waking hours in the year. And like, that's a pretty good deal, right? Like maybe let's round it to 2% of your waking hours to plan, to actually go through the other 98% with direction and knowing what you want and like setting. I think that is like an amazing deal. And I do find that like, and I'm talking about like adding up the 10 minutes per day plus the week plus the, it has such a profound effect on helping me kind of move with more intention, for creating more activities that I enjoy, for saving time to sometimes prevent things that would have been very reactive if I hadn't caught them. And with kids, there's a lot of things where you need to do that planning ahead more so Like spontaneity works more when you don't have a baby. When you do, if you want to, go to that work retreat, you already need to be thinking about childcare maybe months in advance. So there's actually like more planning tasks that kind of go with having kids. I will say like the elaborateness of my planning rituals has shifted somewhat, especially during the like very sleep deprived baby phases, like when they're little and they're not sleeping through the night and they're like eating all night long. I did have to dial certain things down because during that phase, my energy wasn't where it needed to be. So I think I still did planning, but it was definitely a little bit lower key. And my life didn't have as room for quite as much, although it still had room for some. I would not say to go down to zero. But I will say a few of our attendees of our workshop live had young kids and they were like, this is the break I needed. This is what my brain was craving.
Fun.
So if there is a way to get some time, and if you do work and you have some kind of childcare, then the easiest way to do this is to just take a day or two of PTO and just like corral yourself to do it. And if you can't take the nights because you still have a baby that like needs you at night, then at least you could take like, an 8 to 5 or so.
Yeah, it feels like such a chicken and egg situation for a lot of people. It's like, oh, you're feeling really overwhelmed. Well, what do your planning routines look like? But then it's like, oh, you're too overwhelmed to find time for planning. Like one has to come if you're going to get out of that cycle of overwhelm and feeling like you are being reactive or you do feel like you're not making time for the things that are important to you. Like you said, it does take a lot of intention because we're all busy people. And if we don't plan things out and think ahead of time, we can miss a lot of opportunities. And the days go by so quickly, the years go by so quickly, and it's easy to not take a step back and think about like, what do I actually want for my life? Or, a lot of business owners listening to this, what do I actually want for my business? And we can get caught in those routines where we're doing the same thing over and over again without taking that step back. So I agree, super powerful. And it's interesting, 1.5%. That's very small. I'm glad that you did the math on that. That's really interesting.
Yeah, we have a lot of hours. As I learned from Laura Vanderkam, she taught me well, 168 hours per week. That's a lot. I mean, we're sleeping for like maybe 50 of them, but like that's still a lot.
Yeah, totally. And I want to close on this question. So you've obviously built a really successful podcast, 2 very successful podcasts. And like I said, a lot of business owners are listening to this. Many of them are considering starting a podcast. I'm obviously a podcaster and personally want to hear your answer to this. But what do you feel has been the secret to your success? And you can answer for either podcast if you feel like they're different.
I mean, first of all, I don't feel like I'm that successful. Like the numbers may look good, but if anybody thinks I'm like earning a full-time living off of my podcast specifically, like they are very wrong because I don't know how big you have to be for that to happen, but bigger than me. I do have sponsors. So it's like, okay, I'm not going negative or anything like that. But yeah, however, podcasts, of course, can be used to share news about other things that offer that might be really helpful for business. So I 100% understand like that side of thing. But just in and of itself, unless anyone thinks I'm like earning $1 million per episode, that's just a very few people, and most of them are like celebrities. So unfortunately, no. I don't know. Be consistent. I definitely come out with stuff pretty much every single week, Laura, and I have never missed a week. We plan ahead. We get stuff done. Like literally, I think once we had to record when I was fleeing from a hurricane, Irma, in 2017, but we were like, goodness, we are getting an episode out, okay? So, and that was kind of fun. It was, don't worry, I was not risking my life. We were just like having a conversation about fleeing a hurricane. So, but yeah, being consistent, talking about something that you are passionate about and love, because if you're not excited about the topic, then you're going to come off as boring. So,
and you're going to run out of stuff to talk about real quick.
Yes, I think you're right. So I think those would be my top 2. And then some of it's luck. I don't even know. Like, I mean, some people got way luckier than I did. So it's all on a spectrum.
Yeah, for sure. One question that we've been closing the podcast with recently is, what's one thing you think business owners can stop doing? And you can say like women in general, if you want to. What is one thing we can stop doing?
Ooh, stop doing. I would stop. Well, this is a little bit controversial, but to the extent you can, I would stop scrolling social media thinking that connections there are going to explode your business, because in most cases, that's probably not true. And for most people, that behavior probably is like a net negative in terms of stress and time spent.
Have you broken up with social media?
Yeah, I don't do social media. I haven't. I have an Instagram, like it exists, but like in 2021, I kind of put an away message and I haven't touched it since then.
Yep. Yep, for sure. I recently called out one of my clients because we're doing a time tracking challenge this month in my group coaching program. And some of them were like, I'm kind of scared to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I talked to several of you in the middle of the day on Instagram. So I'm very curious to know what we all find out. It's definitely a problem for a lot of people, especially business owners. Like you said, it can be a dangerous trap because there's so much good that can come from having real conversations there. But also, it is a little bit of a black hole and you can get sucked in very quickly. So, one thing we can stop doing, scrolling social media mindlessly. Where can listeners find you after the show for those who want to get connected and be in your world?
Yeah, not social media. So you can find me at my old school website, which is theshoebox.com, theshubox.com. You can find me at Best Laid Plans Podcast and Best of Both Worlds. And if you happen to be interested in planning 2025 with me, you can find information on that at theshoebox.com/courses.
Perfect. And we will link all of those in the show notes. So thank you so much again. This was so fun. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jade.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Business Edit podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd be so grateful if you take a screenshot and share it on Instagram, tagging me at jadeboyd.co. I'm on a mission to empower a new generation of women to become the types of wives, moms, and business owners that they've always wanted to be. Because empowered women change their families and communities for the better, and this is how we'll change the world. Sharing your takeaways from this episode on Instagram will help more women in business discover helpful episodes and level up in life and business each week. Don't forget to check out the show notes for the tools and resources mentioned in today's episode, because good ideas don't grow businesses. Action does. I'll see you next time on the Business Edit podcast. The number of women burning out is at an all-time high right now, and I'm on a mission to change that. If you're a service provider who's feeling overwhelmed, overworked, and underpaid, don't let another year go by staying stuck. The Business Edit is a 12-month group coaching program that helps you declutter your business from top to bottom so that you can have shorter to-do lists, a clear strategy to scale, and know exactly what to focus on each week to drive results in your business. You'll end the year with the business that you've been dreaming of building, one that gives you your life back and pays you more than you ever made before. In the program, you'll follow my signature 5-step method for scaling your service-based business. You'll get business minimalist strategy, marketing, systems, and productivity roadmaps that are simple to understand and easy to implement. Plus, 12 months of customized one-on-one coaching to help you every step of the way. Join me inside the Business Edit at www.jadeboyd.co/coaching and get my step-by-step blueprint with everything you need to build your dream business in 2024. Now back to the show.